Have you ever wondered if the way you manage money after 70 could quietly reveal how many years you still have ahead? Most people think that living a long life is all about genetics, fancy supplements, or expensive healthcare. But in reality, the answer might be much simpler and more practical. You see, after spending time with dozens of seniors who are still thriving well into their 80s and 90s, I started noticing a pattern. These people weren't rich. They didn't follow extreme diets or routines. What they shared were small, consistent lifestyle habits, especially in how they handled stress, money, and daily choices. In today's video, we're going to look at 7 science-backed signs that may quietly predict how long you'll live after age 70. But we're not just looking at medical data. We're approaching this from a different lens: your financial habits and your lifestyle decisions. If you're living on a fixed income, if you've retired or are planning to, or if you're simply trying to live longer without spending a fortune, then this list may give you more clarity than any blood test ever could. These signs are not loud or dramatic, but they show up in quiet ways, in how you spend, how you plan your days, and how you relate to money and meaning. If you recognize a few of these signs in your own life, you might be on track to live a longer, more peaceful life than you imagined. Let's begin. Sign number 1. You spend less than you earn. This may seem obvious, but it's more powerful than most people realize. Many of the longest-living seniors don't just live longer because of what they eat or how often they exercise. They live longer because they experience less financial stress. And one of the biggest reasons for that peace of mind is this simple habit. They consistently spend less than they earn. Not out of fear, not out of scarcity, but out of clarity. These are people who understand their financial limits and respect them. They know what comes in, they know what goes out, and they plan accordingly. That quiet discipline keeps their nervous system calm. It lowers cortisol, the stress hormone that's been linked to everything from heart disease to memory problems. But here's the key. These people don't feel deprived. They enjoy what they have. They find comfort in simplicity. Maybe it's a warm cup of coffee in the morning, a walk around the neighborhood, or a quiet hobby at home. They don't need to chase more to feel fulfilled. Let me ask you, when was the last time you spent money and felt completely at peace with it? No guilt, no fear, just clarity and satisfaction. Spending less than you earn without feeling deprived is a quiet kind of freedom. And over time, that freedom becomes health. That health becomes longevity, and that longevity becomes legacy. Sign number 2. You stick to a daily routine and budget. There's something deeply life-giving about having a rhythm to your day. People who live long, healthy lives after 70 often follow a simple but steady daily routine. They tend to wake up at the same time. They eat regular meals. They move their bodies consistently, even if it's just a short walk or some light stretching. Their days are calm, predictable, and intentional. And just like they honor the rhythm of time, they also honor the rhythm of money. They know how much they can spend in a week or a month. They plan ahead for essentials. They track their bills, not because they're obsessed with every penny, but because they value stability. That financial structure gives them peace. I remember my grandfather used to have a small notebook, tattered, with pages curled at the edges. Every morning before breakfast, he'd sit by the window and log every expense from the day before. Just $1.50 for bread, $2 for bus fare. Nothing fancy. But when he talked about money, there was no tension in his voice, no panic. Just this steady, quiet confidence that came from knowing where he stood. At the time, I thought it was old-fashioned. Now I realize It was wisdom in disguise. Science supports this too. Studies have shown that older adults with consistent routines sleep better, experience less anxiety, and are less likely to develop cognitive decline. When you pair that structure with mindful budgeting, you reduce the daily friction that wears on the body and spirit over time. Let me ask you, do your days feel scattered, or do they follow a pattern that brings you peace? Do you know where your money is going, or does it feel like it slips away without you noticing? People who live long don't leave their time or their finances up to chance. They build systems that support them. They don't chase perfection. They lean into rhythm. And in that rhythm, they find not just balance, but strength. Sign number 3. You make thoughtful, not fearful, financial decisions. One of the most overlooked signs of longevity is how someone makes decisions, especially when it comes to money. Some people become overly cautious with age. Others still act on impulse. But those who age gracefully tend to find a middle ground. They're not reckless, but they're not frozen by fear either. Instead, they make thoughtful, values-based choices. They know when to say no, but they also know when to say yes to the small joys that matter. A weekend trip to visit their grandkids, a comfortable new pair of shoes, a donation to a cause they care about. These aren't acts of indulgence. They're acts of alignment with what truly matters. I'll never forget a moment with my Aunt Helen. She was 83 at the time. One afternoon, I asked her if she ever felt guilty spending money on things like art supplies or eating out. She smiled and said, "No, sweetheart. I've already worried enough for 3 lifetimes. These days, if it makes my heart feel alive and I've planned for it, I do it." That line stayed with me. You see, it's not about having a big bank account. It's about knowing your values and spending accordingly. People who live long often have this calm confidence in their decisions. They're not controlled by fear of running out. They trust themselves. And that inner trust reduces stress and invites health. Let me ask you, do you hesitate to spend even when it's something that aligns with your values? Or are you spending just to fill a void? Long life is rarely built on fear. It's built on clarity, trust, and choices that reflect who you are, not who you're afraid to become. Sign number 4. You prioritize nutrition over convenience. If you walk into the kitchen of someone who's lived past 90, chances are you won't find much in the freezer. You won't see stacks of processed food or brightly packaged snacks. What you'll likely find is something far more humble. Some fresh vegetables, maybe a jar of lentils or beans, a pot of soup warming on the stove. In the lives of many long-living elders, food is not just fuel. It's a quiet ritual of care. And it's one of the most practical, affordable, and powerful signs of a longer life. People who live past 70 and continue to thrive rarely rely on fast food or microwave dinners. They don't necessarily follow trendy diets or obsess over calorie counts. What they do consistently is prioritize real food over convenience. They prepare their own meals, even if it's something simple like rice and steamed greens or a boiled egg with toast. They trust what their hands make more than what comes in a plastic wrapper. And more importantly, they eat mindfully. What's remarkable is that eating this way doesn't require wealth. In fact, some of the longest living populations in the world, like those in Okinawa, Sardinia, and the Nicoya Peninsula, eat very modestly. Their diets are based on whole, affordable staples: beans, rice, root vegetables, leafy greens, and fermented foods. They eat slowly. They often cook with family, and they rarely eat alone. I remember an afternoon years ago when I visited my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. She was 87 at the time, sharp as a tack and full of stories. Every day at exactly 4:30, she made herself a bowl of soup. It changed depending on what was in season. Sometimes butternut squash, sometimes carrots and onions, always with herbs she grew on her windowsill. "I eat what my grandmother would recognize," she told me. "If it didn't exist 50 years ago, it probably doesn't belong in my belly." That stuck with me. Science backs this up. A study published in the journal Age and Aging found that older adults who cook at home regularly have better memory, stronger immune function, and lower rates of depression. It turns out what we choose to put on our plate each day has a direct impact on how long we live and how well we live. So let me ask you, when you open your fridge or pantry, do you feel nourished or do you feel rushed? Food doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be real. When we slow down, cook simple meals, and treat food as an act of care instead of a chore, something shifts. Our bodies heal more easily, our minds become clearer, and quietly, without drama or big promises, we begin to add years to our life. It's not about perfection, it's about consistency. And every home-cooked meal is a quiet step toward a longer, more peaceful life. Sign number 5. You avoid financial isolation. One of the quiet dangers of aging isn't just loneliness, it's isolation in decision-making, especially when it comes to money. Many people, as they grow older, begin to retreat inward. They stop talking openly about their finances. They feel ashamed for not saving enough, or they don't want to burden their children with questions about bills or retirement accounts. So they keep it all inside. They make choices alone. And that silence slowly becomes a form of stress that no one else can see. But those who live well into their 80s and 90s often do something very different. They stay connected, not just socially, but financially. They ask questions. They share what they're thinking. They bring someone into the loop. Maybe it's a trusted child, a niece, a financial counselor, or even a friend from church. The point is, they don't carry the weight of money in silence. A few years ago, I met a woman named Gloria at a community center event. She was 78, lively, smart, and extremely organized. She said something that stuck with me. "Every few months, I have a money date with my daughter. We sit down over coffee, I show her what I'm spending, and she gives me a second set of eyes. Not because I'm not capable, but because I don't want to do life alone." That sentence hit me. I don't want to do life alone. You see, financial isolation doesn't always look dramatic. It looks like avoiding conversations. It looks like hiding bills in drawers. It looks like saying, "I'm fine," when you're not. And over time, it creates internal pressure that affects sleep, blood pressure, memory, and even how you eat. Studies have shown that seniors who maintain relational transparency around money are more likely to make healthy financial decisions, avoid scams, and feel emotionally supported. It's not just about getting help. It's about staying human, staying real, and staying connected. Let me ask you this. Do you have someone in your life you can talk to about money without shame? Someone who listens without judgment and offers perspective when you need it? If the answer is yes, nurture that relationship. If the answer is no, consider who in your life might be able to hold space for that role. It doesn't have to be a financial expert. Sometimes it's simply someone who listens and cares. Aging doesn't have to mean shrinking, and financial health doesn't mean doing it all on your own. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say isn't, "I know what I'm doing." It's simply, "Can I walk through this with someone?" Sign number 6. you stay curious about ways to save or improve. It's easy to assume that curiosity fades with age, that after 70, most people settle into their habits and stop exploring new ideas. But in many of the longest living people I've met, there's one thing they all seem to have in common. They never stop asking questions. And not just big questions about life or purpose, but small, practical ones too. Like, is there a better way to pay this bill? Could I grow my own herbs instead of buying them? Is there a senior discount for that service? Or even, what's this new app my grandson mentioned? Can it help me track my spending? These aren't just frugal thoughts. They're signs of a curious, engaged mind, and that's a powerful indicator of longevity. A curious mind stays sharp. It challenges old habits. It finds better ways to do familiar things. It keeps learning, not from textbooks, but from life. I remember a gentleman named Leo, who I met at a senior technology workshop. He was 79, retired from a career in construction, and had never used a smartphone before. But that day, he sat patiently learning how to use a cashback app for groceries. At one point, I asked him, "Do you really need to do this? You seem like you're doing just fine." He smiled and said, "Maybe. But I like knowing what I don't know. That's what keeps me alive." That sentence hit me. I like knowing what I don't know. That's the spirit that often separates those who age passively from those who age intentionally. One shuts down, the other stays open. And being open, especially when it comes to saving money, simplifying systems, or adjusting habits, can make everyday life more manageable and meaningful. You don't need to be a financial expert, but you do need to remain awake to the possibility that there's always room for small improvements. Studies in brain health and aging have repeatedly found that mental engagement in daily tasks, including budgeting, decision-making, and financial planning, helps slow cognitive decline. And it makes people feel more confident, more in control, and more at peace. So, let me ask you, when was the last time you changed something about your routine, just because you found a better way? When was the last time you felt curious, not out of fear, but out of excitement? Curiosity isn't about keeping up with trends. It's about staying in relationship with the world, adjusting, refining, and learning how to live smarter with what you have. Even small changes, switching to bulk purchases, negotiating a bill, or learning to cook something new, can renew your sense of confidence and purpose. People who stay curious don't just live longer. They live lighter. They live freer. And most of all, they live with a quiet joy that comes from growth, no matter what age they are. Sign number 7. You don't equate worth with wealth. This might be the quietest sign of all, but also the most powerful. As we grow older, it's easy to measure our value by what we used to earn, what we used to produce, or what we used to provide for others. The world often tells us that our worth comes from our output, that if we're no longer working, no longer earning, no longer contributing, then somehow we matter less. But the people who live long and live well don't buy into that lie. They don't confuse net worth with self-worth. They understand that value isn't measured in bank accounts, job titles, or retirement portfolios. It's measured in presence, in kindness, in legacy, in peace. Some of the most grounded, emotionally healthy elders I've ever met are not wealthy by any standard definition. But they walk with dignity. They smile often. They listen more than they speak. And they still see themselves as someone who matters. I once visited a woman named Clara. She was 86 and lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment. No car, no internet. Her clothes were simple. Her furniture was old. But when you entered her home, It felt like peace wrapped around you. She offered you tea before you could sit down. She remembered your last conversation, and every corner of her tiny home had a handwritten note or photo of someone she loved. At one point I asked, "Clara, do you ever feel like the world forgets people after a certain age?" She paused, smiled gently, and said, "The world might forget, but I don't need its attention to know I still matter." That moment has stayed with me for years, because what Clara had wasn't just grace, it was freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from no longer needing to prove anything, no longer needing to chase or impress, no longer needing to justify your existence with numbers or titles. And that inner peace, backed by decades of life experience, hardship, and growth, is something no stock market can buy. Scientific studies in gerontology have shown that a strong sense of purpose and positive self-identity are among the top predictors of longevity. Not cholesterol, not blood pressure, but purpose, identity, inner peace. So let me ask you this, gently. Do you still see yourself as valuable, even if no one is applauding you anymore? Even if your job is done? Even if your bank account is smaller than it used to be? Because you are valuable. You still belong. And your story, your wisdom, your love, they all still matter. The elders who live the longest often carry this quiet confidence. They don't need the world to validate them. They've learned how to validate themselves. And that inner calm, it ripples into their health, their relationships, their daily choices. It gives their body and soul permission to rest without giving up. They've made peace with who they are. And in doing so, they've made room for life to keep flowing through them. Now that you've heard these 7 signs, I invite you to take a moment and reflect. Not with judgment, not with pressure, but with honesty. How many of these signs do you already see in your life? Are you spending with clarity instead of stress? Are you living with rhythm, choosing nourishment, and staying open to growth? Are you walking through life with someone by your side, or carrying it all alone? And most importantly, do you still see your life as valuable, even in its quietest seasons? These signs aren't about perfection. They're not about following a rigid checklist. They're small indicators, like steady pulses, that your life is still rooted in peace, in purpose, and in presence. Longevity is never guaranteed. But peace, simplicity, emotional freedom, those are things we can practice, starting today. And the more we do, the more we align our bodies and minds with a life that lasts, not just in years, but in meaning. I believe your best years are not behind you. They're right here, in every mindful choice, every honest conversation, every quiet act of care you give to yourself. If this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which sign spoke to you the most? Which one are you working on? Or already living fully? Feel free to share in the comments. I read everyone. And if you found this message helpful, consider subscribing to this channel for more thoughtful conversations on aging with grace, living with intention, and building a life that matters at every stage. Take care of yourself. You are deeply needed. You are not forgotten. And you are still growing. I'll see you in the next video.